Warning, this episode is very visually focused. If you wish to see all the trailers discussed in this episode, simply head over to this episode's link at pauseyourgame.com where you can find a link to every single trailer discussed.
It's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum. And I'm all out of gum.
Ready? Here we go.
Let's do this.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Pause Your Game Podcast. This episode, I guess, is going to be just me. There is no we. It's a monologue, this episode. So it's a lot of me talking to me. If you get tired of listening to me, take a break. There is going to be a lot of me in this episode. So, yeah, buckle in. This is this is our post TGS special episode, brought to you by, once again, me and not those other people. So we're going to go over a little bit of all the news announced. I went over a little bit in the one-man show I did earlier, and I guess it's going to be another one-man show this week. So let's just dive right in. So first up, we had Bloodborne during Sony's press conference. They showed off the old hunts. What they showed off later was mainly showing off the new weapons. So there's two to three new weapons. They went into detail about two of them. So the first was there's a bow and arrow type of trick weapon. I forget the names of these new weapons, but I at least remember their functions. So there's a bow and arrow that you get in the new Bloodborne DLC, and every shot, as you might imagine, takes up a bullet. And the interesting thing is that I guess to try to keep it from being overpowered, is the one thing that they did was it basically kills your stamina bar. I mean, it's not completely out. You can still dodge afterwards, but you're not going to be able to take another shot. So they don't want people just standing back and shooting. So I think that's a nice balance to give you a little variety in your weaponry, especially adding a ranged variant into the game, because currently it's just pistols and sidearms. So this is a really interesting way of getting that in there, but without having people rely on it. So yeah, you have a bow. It switches over to a sword, as you might imagine, because that's what I think bows are closest to, is swords. So the sword functions much like a sword. That's about it. The other weapon was it works as a cross between the threaded cane, which has a whip function, and like the cleaver, right? So the way it works is that the normal, unwhipified version of the weapon, you're just attacking with normally. But instead, this time around, of the whip being fast and quick, it's real heavy. So the whip, when you transform into it, there's a lot of delay, there's a lot of movement into getting an attack, but it hits like a truck and it hits everything. So that's one I'm personally interested in. That's the one that I'm definitely going to try. I played X when I was doing Bloodborne originally, so I like having that reach regardless of the speed. So that's definitely something I'll look into with that. And there's a third one, which it's basically, it's not a chainsaw. It's like a buzz saw to it. I don't think there was anything more on that. If there was, I just didn't see it. So the other thing was Gravity Rush Remastered. I talked about this last time. There's really nothing new about it from what I mentioned before, except that it's coming to PS4. It looks beautiful. And apparently Gravity Rush is getting an anime adaptation. So I don't know why. I guess, not that I don't know why, but I was a little thrown off by that. I didn't understand why they were like, hey, let's do an anime adaptation for Gravity Rush. I mean, it's a good game, but it's not exactly story. It's not deep in story. It's it has a story, and it's a good story for what it has, but it's not like a complex. There's not a lot to it. It's very light on the surface kind of story, but it's still interesting. But it's a story that's very held up together by like the imagery and the game world itself, where it's a game that you're not going in to the story. It's a game that you're playing the game, and the story helps make the game feel more alive. But if it wasn't there, you'd still be on board. So yeah, they're making an anime. Gravity Rush 2 is coming out to PS4 only, and that's going to be coming out to Japan. They haven't mentioned anything for the West yet, so I don't know why. I don't know why we haven't heard anything. I thought Gravity Rush did great. I mean, maybe not sales wise, but Gravity Rush definitely did great in the ratings. I mean, sales was mostly because it was on the Vita, so perhaps they're a little cautious. But I mean, it was received quite strongly, so I don't see why they wouldn't just jump right in with having Gravity Rush 2 and bringing that over. But hopefully, we'll hear a Gravity Rush 2 announcement sometime soon. Next up with Ubisoft. So I just to let everybody know, that was from Software. That was their whole announcement. So Ubisoft just had a Jack the Ripper trailer. That's it. That's all there is to talk about on that. It's just DLC. I'm not really worried about it. It's Assassin's Creed stuff, so I'm not surprised by it. Sega did more of their reminder of what they're not bringing. So Phantasy Star 2 for PS4. It's still not over here. I don't know why they refuse to bring it over here. I don't know why they don't want to bring it over here. Sega seems the most behind in literally all of this. They are the only one out of this whole group of all these Japanese game makers that they easily have the largest number of games that are not coming over to the West at all. And yeah, there's that whole Yakuza series that basically they're sending us a old version on PS3 that they're like, hey, do you like this? And then Phantasy Star 2 is just not coming over. Period. There's never been anything. I don't know why. I thought Phantasy Star did good over here, but apparently not well enough for Sega. So yeah, Sega's basically bringing nothing over. Now there are stuff that Sega is publishing that will be coming over, or perhaps is in partnership with, and a lot of Sega stuff seems to be in partnership with Atlas, but that is coming over. But Sega's own titles, that's what I'm really getting at. Sega's titles, the ones that they develop, just do not seem to ever work their way out to the West at all. And I don't get it. Phantasy Star was a series that I thought did pretty well over here, and it's been over here several times before. And they have 2 Phantasy Star games that could possibly be brought over, but they won't bring over any of them. So it's just confusing. I don't understand what they're trying to accomplish with it. I don't get where they're going with it, or anything like that. So yeah, that's a bit of an annoyance. So next up we had Atlas. Atlas brought along Persona 5. And if Beth was here, she'd talk about it. But, nobody showed up, so it's just me. And so Persona 5 was brought over. It looks pretty good. I've never been a fan of the Persona series. And, I mean, it's not like I'm against it. It's just I never got into it. The trailer looks beautiful. Once again, there seems to be another mechanic. Now, if you know, I believe Persona was the game where people shot themselves in the head to summon beings. And that was I think it was Persona 3. Or 4, one of them, that was the theme. In this one, it's you have to rip off your mask, which apparently tears off part of your face, and then summons a being to fight for you. It looks pretty cool. Style looks awesome. You should check out the trailer. I'll link everything separated out that we had for the show notes, so that way you can go and give that a listen and a watch. But it does look pretty beautiful. The graphics are awesome looking, and it looks crazy over the top. I've never been a Persona fan, but this is one I might try just because this looks so. I mean, it looks like there's a lot to it. It's got a neat art style, and apparently there's also going to be an anime adaptation for it. So there's that to look forward to. But it's going to be coming out for PS4, and yeah, it looks pretty cool. Another thing Atlas had was Odin Sphere. Now, Odin Sphere apparently was a old PS2 game that I guess not a lot of people picked up on. It was a bit of a cult classic, and that the few people who picked it up loved it, and the people who never heard about it. So they're bringing that over. Ooh, sorry, excuse me. And they're bringing that over. It's a 2D RPG or 2D JRPG. So instead of you exploring the world in 3D, it's a side scroller, but it has a very interesting art style. And like I said, it received a great rating when it came out originally. So they're bringing out this new one over to PS4, Vita, and PS3. It's definitely something I'll be checking out on Vita, because that's how I like to play my JRPGs, is in portable format and sitting outside. So yeah, that definitely looks interesting. The trailer shows off a lot of the graphics. I have no idea what's happening. It just looks awesome. So yeah, I'd go give a look out for that. and see what you guys think of it. Definitely unique art style. And those same people are bringing out a new game. So since, like I said, Odin Sphere was a remake of a PS2 game, the same people who made Odin Sphere are bringing out another game that's called 13 Sentinels. It has the same 2D art style. I don't even know what you would call this art style. It's got a very, like, I don't know, I guess a storybook look to it. Yeah, it's really hard to. I'm looking at the trailer now as I'm saying this, and I can't really. It's like a storybook crossed with, like, like Japanese tropes, so like spiky hair and stuff like that. But as far as the general art style, it's got this very storybook, a very layered. That's probably the word. It's very layered in its visual representation. So, things are very clearly in the backdrop. Things are clearly up front, and they're blocking the backdrop. It's it's interesting. So 13 Sentinels is the same people. It's the same type of game, and it has the same style. Once again, looks pretty cool. It has this 2D art style, but I think with 13 Sentinels, their big thing is that they make it so while you're on a 2D plane, the background has a very 3D feel. Like, things happen in the background and interact with where you are. And yeah, it looks interesting. Not a lot of detail. It's really just a teaser trailer. It's like a minute long, but it looks different. It's interesting. Something I would once again like to try out. It's not something I've played before or have any idea what it might be like, but I'm interested enough in it to give it a go. So that's Atlas is showing. And then next we went over to Koei Tecmo, which brought over. They got a whole bunch of shit. Koei Tecmo has been really on their game about bringing a whole bunch of games west. They've not only focusing on their own titles, but they've also had a few titles that existing franchises. So I showed off Attack on Titan, which is a great anime, by the way. You should go watch Attack on Titan. I highly suggest watching it over most other formats because they do a very good job of showing. I use the term instead of fear. They show despair or hopelessness. Does a really good job in how it looks with that. So they showed off the game. It looks a lot better than the 3DS version that came out. It looks a lot more complex, a lot more going on. I still have no idea if I'd play it or buy it because it seems like it would get repetitive real fast still. I mean, you're still flying around. I mean, they added more to the killing of the Titans, where you don't just have to you don't just go in for the kill and it's a quick time event. There's more going on. You have to, there is some strategy of like cutting off their limbs and finally taking them down. And but I don't see it being more than that. Like, I kill one Titan and I feel like I've killed them all. It's you can add layers to it, but I don't feel like there's enough strategy involved in it. I always say that they should make an Attack on Titan game for Wii U, or like if PS Move came back or something like that, where you could have like both controllers as your swords, and they also control in the game they have the 3D maneuvering gear, which is basically like gas powered grappling hooks that can swing you around. So if you had one in each hand, like a Wiimote or the PS Move, you could go one and then to the other, and then you can control on the screen where you're pulling and going. I think that would be really cool, but they're not doing that. It's something I like. I think that would add a lot of interesting gameplay to it, because then it's less of the Titans. The Titans may be the same and they may vary in height and how they react or whatever, but even then it's not going to be that crazy. What's going to be different though is the environment in which you're working with and flying around, and you're going to have to take a different approach. Because that's even an issue they bring up in the show and the manga and all that stuff, where it's like they have it where they're in an open field. They can't, use the roofs or something of houses to rappel off of. They just have the, in a field. So they kind of have to like launch themselves at the enemy and then use the enemy itself to get around and make the kill. It's a lot harder. So I think that's where the variety of the game could come in if you did something like that. But anyway, they have I think it's coming out for everything Sony. So PS4, PS3, and Vita. You can give it a look if you're a fan. I mean, I like the show, but I still don't think I'd buy the game. It just doesn't seem like it would hold my attention. They showed off Hyrule Warriors Legends, just to let everyone know, if you do plan on getting it, that the way the 3D is going to work in there is that you have to have a new 3DS to use the 3D function for Hyrule Warriors Legends. It's simply just too demanding, so you need to have the higher version, the better 3DS, so that way you have 3D. Otherwise, they didn't say any other differences, but they did show off some of the Wind Waker specific editions. They look interesting, although they showed some gameplay footage off, and the trailer I think does a great job of hiding it. But when they show the gameplay footage, it just looks a little empty of a game, just because the enemy counts are much smaller than what they would be on my Wii U. So I don't know how I feel about it. I do like the idea of it being portable. I just don't know if portable is going to be enough to commit me to it. But it's probably one of those I'll buy it anyway, and then I'll see where I'm at, because you can transfer. I mean, there is some compatibility between it and the Wii U version, so there is that going for it. And I do own everything on the Wii U version. I got the DLC pack early because it looked like fun, and it was fun. But there's just a weird thing. I like some of these games in portable format, so I don't know if you guys are like that or not. Do any of you have this where you're like, I'll play this game in a portable format, but I would never sit down on my TV and play it, stuff like that? Or am I crazy? I don't know. Let me know. Let me know in the comments if you have that. I know I'm one of those crazy people where I have like I have bedtime games, as I've always phrased them, which is like games that aren't there's not a lot of action in them, but there's thinking, and it's like you can kind of get lost in it and then fall asleep, like Pokemon or Professor Layton. I know I was doing Phoenix Wright there for a while, where you can read, and then you save, and then you pass out because you read, or you did you solved a puzzle and you did a couple of them, and then now you're tired and you go into bed. It takes forever to finish them that way, but I kind of enjoy them more like that, because if I do them during the middle of the day, I get into this like lull of just like, I don't feel like doing anything else, because now that I've committed to doing all these puzzles, I'm getting tired. I'm going to go take a nap. All right, that was a little diversion. Let's get back to Koei Tecmo. So they had Toukiden 2, which is their Monster Hunter ripoff. I shouldn't say it's a ripoff. It's just like, you have to understand in Japan, all right, that Monster Hunter is to them as Call of Duty is to us, all right? So they have, Call of Duty is like the base game, right? If you ask somebody, do they play games, and they say yes, you probably have a good chance of it being Call of Duty. And for over there, it's Monster Hunter. It's huge over there. It's disgustingly huge over there. You need to understand this. It is as big as Call of Duty is for us. So them making, I guess it's their ripoff. It's kind of like the same for us making different first-person shooters. They're making hunter games. That's their spiel. I don't know why they're so big over there, but they're fucking huge. So Toukiden is Koei Tecmo's, whereas instead of monsters, it's demons, and you're fighting them and whatever. So new trailer out. They didn't really show any gameplay. They didn't even show, I don't believe, what consoles it's coming to. It's coming to everything. Everything's Sony. It's coming to everything Sony. So it'll be PS4, PS3, and Vita. There's no gameplay footage. So the first one wasn't bad. I played a demo of it, but I only got room for one hunting game in my life, and right now that's Monster Hunter 4. And with Monster Hunter Cross, which I'm going to get to later, I don't see time for Toukiden working it in. Now maybe if I was bigger into hunting games, but I like Monster Hunter. I just if I'm gonna have, they take up so much time, so having more than one is hard enough. Monster Hunter, you could drop like hundreds of hours into it, easy, no problem, and still have plenty to do. So next up we have they have Neo. Or Nihao. I don't fucking know how you pronounce this. So it's Nioh. Someone please correct me on this. So it just looks like Bloodborne with samurais. That's the best description. They have a trailer out. It's like Bloodborne with samurais. It has some of the similar systems, some of the similar style, even pacing, like gameplay pacing and action. I love Bloodborne, and I'm always looking for more of these Bloodborne-esque games. So I'll keep an eye out for Neo because I do like the idea of it being a samurai game. I don't know how that would be different. Maybe it'll be a game that focuses more on, instead of blocking, or in Bloodborne it's dodging. It might be more on like parrying or stuff like that. So we'll see. Something to keep an eye on. They don't, once again, no real gameplay footage. They showed a little. It was like 10 seconds of them just destroying like what looked like a zombie, or a demon zombie, or some demon-esque zombie. Yeah, some weird combination. Once again, keeping my eye out for it. SNK had one thing. That was King of Fighters 4. If you watch the trailer, I was never a big King of Fighters fan. I'm not a big fighting game fan, period. It's too much effort to really get into a fighting game. You know, you need like the fucking $150 like arcade stick and all of that if you really wanted to get into a fighting game, because the controller, your main controller, never feels like it's enough. After playing, some of the more modern fighting games like Killer Instinct, there was a lot of times where you're like, I don't understand why this combination isn't working, and it's just your controller is just being a pain, because it's not really, modern day controllers really aren't set up for fighting games. They're set up for like first person shooters or action adventure games. They're great at that. So fighting games, you might need a fight pad, which nobody seems to offer on Xbox One that's any good. And then if you're really into it, what you get is an arcade stick. Most people have an arcade stick. Not everybody. Some people who play do stick with the controller, but a lot of people go with the arcade stick because you can make these very big movements, which then become, so then you don't screw up what you're supposed to do, because you have to do this whole thing with your hand rather than just your thumb, like rolling it. It's like a whole wrist thing now to get the arcade stick to go around and press the big ass fucking buttons. So it makes sure moves more deliberate. And I think that's why a lot of people go with them. But so they showed off King of Fighters, I think it's 14. It just kind of, the trailer didn't make it seem all that great. King of Fighters used to be, its big spiel was like it was a 2D flashy kind of game, and it's a very technical fighter. There's a lot of technical to King of Fighters, and I think that was its big thing, but it just didn't look that interesting off of the commercial for it, or the trailer. So I don't know. So we'll go to Square Enix. Square Enix has a lot of things that I'm actually interested in. It's like 50-50 with them. So they had Star Ocean 5. They had a long gameplay footage of Star Ocean 5. They had a trailer, obviously, but there was fair amount of gameplay showing it off. It looks pretty awesome. The graphics are beautiful. Like, the world is set up. It has a very nice art style. But what the gameplay footage showed is, some of the action, I can't understand. It's all in Japanese. There's not a lot going on because, once again, it's in Japanese. There's no real story that was revealed, but it was big on the gameplay. So if you want to go take a look at that, it looks interesting. It is. I've never played Star Ocean, but I will keep an eye on this one, just because if I'm gonna play an RPG and it's gonna be on my TV, it needs to be action based, and this is that. It's an action RPG. So I'll be keeping an eye on it. It's another one to keep an eye on. Final Fantasy World. That is like the Final Fantasy game where you play through all the other Final Fantasy games as like some sort of weird time traveler, and it's super chibi. And yeah, so they showed off that. That's all I'm gonna go over. It's super chibi. It goes over all the other Final Fantasy worlds. It literally, yeah, it goes through all the other Final Fantasies. It makes things super, super chibi. Like, you walk around as super chibi. It's just the head to body proportion is insane. And yeah, I'm not going to play it because it's super chibi. And that's the end of that. And then next up we have Project Setsuna. Apparently there was a lot of information on this previously that I had no idea about. But of course I don't keep up to date really on a lot of Square Enix projects. It has the old kind of like top down, like small, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Like small character view or whatever, where they're not chibis. They're just tiny because of how the screen, like they're animified or whatever. And then it's top down, so they look really tiny, but it has a very, clean art style to it. And it's a JRPG. I don't think there's anything else crazy going on with it. Yeah, it's just a JRPG, but it's a very calming. It's a very calming trailer. It's very very delightful and light, and there's a lot of snow, and they show some of the combat, and it's very very stylized. So it's something I'll keep a lookout for. It'll be coming to PS4 and Vita, so I'll keep an eye on it. Nothing really else going on about it. They showed off Final Fantasy Adventure. That is a remake of an old Game Boy game, if you might remember. It's coming to, now this is the weird part about it, is that someone decided, like, how will we make this remake? And they're like, well, let's bring it to Vita and then phones. So I don't know how it'll work with phones. I never played the original on my Game Boy because I wasn't into Final Fantasy back then on my Game Boy. I didn't get into it like most other people till it hit like 7, and I had a PlayStation. So yeah, it's coming to Vita and phones. So I don't know what kind of quality it's gonna have, or stuff like that. But I mean, Final Fantasy Adventures kind of plays like if you look at it, it plays like a Zelda game a little bit. I mean, you have attack, you have other stuff, you have magic, but it's not turn based or anything. Yeah, so it's a lot like a Zelda game. I don't know. We'll see what happens with it. You can check it out beneath this episode where we'll have all these links. Another Final Fantasy 15 trailer, which they had a couple. They had more than one. They had another trailer that just showed off like an additional woman, and we had no idea who she was. But then they showed off, they kind of went into detail about a little bit of the backstory. So the white-haired woman is she's an oracle of some sort, but she's kind of kept under the government's rule, but because she's an oracle, she kind of has like a little bit of leeway. And it's confusing. I'm not really going to get into it on this podcast because it's just that's for another discussion. But what they did, the trailer showed off a little bit more of like what's the happenings of the situation, and then afterwards, after the trailer release, they showed off some gameplay footage showing that chocobos are in fact back. That's always a plus. You got to have the chocobos, and they play the chocobo music. You got to have the chocobo music. It's a requirement in all Final Fantasy games. And then they had that, and they showed off fishing. I know, right? They're like, we'll pick the most mundane things possible, and we will show them off to Final Fantasy 15 players, and they will love it because it'll look amazing. And it does look amazing, but it's still fucking fishing. Yeah, you can go look at that. You can go watch them run around in chocobos for like 5 minutes and then go fish. What cracked me up, though, was that they had, what was it? When you're fishing. When you're fishing and you're trying, like, you catch the fish and you're trying to reel it in, it plays the battle music, which I thought was hilarious, where it's like, it gets kind of dramatic for a fish. Do we reel it in? You're like, the dun 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 dun, and then it kicks up. So I thought that was pretty fucking funny that they like, let's make this fishing dramatic. What are we gonna do? Put the battle music in. That's great. That'll make it seem 10 times better. And Final Fantasy 15 will come out sometime. That's the current timetable for it. Square Enix had a utter shit ton of phone games that I'm not going to talk about. I just want to let you know that there was a lot. I think there was 4 or 5 of them, and they ranged from new to sort of new to we totally just ripped apart one of our old games and made it into mobile, and then that's what we're calling this. So yeah, there's a lot of them. I'm not going over them because, first off, probably most of them will never come over here, ever, because they're phone games, and we really don't care if we miss out on phone games. And then B, like I said, they all seem like they're indicative of something else you played. Some of them are very clearly came from an old game of Final Fantasy, like 11, I think was used like 2 or 3 times, and Final Fantasy Type 0 was one of them. So it's just, yeah. Just know that they're there, and Square Enix is making a lot of them. But unlike Konami, they're not saying fuck everything. They're making them in addition to their mainstay games. So let's move on to Capcom. Monster Hunter X, they showed off a brand new mode. Obviously Monster Hunter X, if you don't know, it is a an amalgamation of all the old Monster Hunter games brought up to speed with a lot of new features. So it's a throwback and a new entry all in the same rolled together. So they have a lot of the monsters we've seen from previous series, especially fan favorites. I mean, they have almost all of them. There's a lot of fucking monsters in this thing. And they added new ones too. And in addition to that, they added like whole new styles of play that you couldn't do before. So before it was like the weapon is your style. Well, now within the weapon there's 4 different styles, and they all overlap on some level, but it just adds more variety. So they add it where it's like you have your normal style, which is how you played Monster Hunter before. Then you have aerial style, which is like you can kind of hop high up on a monster and get like an advantage in the air. Then they have a Bushido style, which is the best way to explain it is like if you perfectly time your dodge, you get a bonus attack and you don't get hurt. So there's that, and then there's I forget what it's like called. What is it, blaster style or something? No, that's not it. I can't think of what it's called. Basically, it's a very aggressive style. So you get less moves, but your moves hit for more, and you can use these special moves more often. But your like normal repertoire of moves is reduced, but you hit like a truck. So they added all that, and they also added the cat. Basically, it's cat mode. So Monster Hunter has what they call palicos, which are basically cats with they're cats that can talk to you and fight, and they steal your stuff in the game, and they work beside you and all that. They serve all different kinds of purposes. So they added a mode where you can now go and play as the palicos, and basically you're like a feline hunter. So you can go in these feline hunter groups. You have different abilities than a normal hunter. You don't really have a weapon selection, but you can play as a cat. You can die a lot more, and it won't negatively affect you. You don't do as much damage, but you're much quicker on your feet, and you have all these like weird tricks up your sleeve. So you have all these strange abilities that the palicos have in previous games, but you can do them now. This is a nice little side addition that they added to it, and that's awesome. So I'm definitely looking forward to Monster Hunter X, but of course there's no Western release. So, bleh. Monster Hunter Stories, they showed off. It's a cross between, it's like Pokemon. All right, it's like Pokemon mixed with Monster Hunter. So you run around the world, and this is within the same. They explain this to be in the same like Monster Hunter universe. It's not its own universe. It's within the normal games. It's just a different village that does this. So you work with the monsters instead this time. So you get a pet monster, and then you have yourself and your weapon. And you run around the world, and obviously there's some sort of story or whatever, but the encounters are like if you ever played Mario and Luigi games, where it's like the mobs run around the world, and depending on how you run into the mob is how the fight starts and stuff like that. So it works like that. You can pick different monsters. You can get different monsters. You can swap them in and out. It's a 2-man team, so it's you and your monster, and it's a turn-based game versus whatever the hell you're facing. So you can swap. It looked like you can swap monsters out in combat. It looked like, and then you can attack, your monster can attack, and you can have special moves where you work together with your monster and attack as a team. So it's just, like I said, it's like Pokemon, because I feel like you probably can run around and go get different monsters and then use them in your team like you would in like Pokemon, where you build up your team and then fight everybody, etc. Same shit. But this time you actually go hunt and capture, and I guess you have to like tame them over to your side. They didn't really get into that. They just showed a little bit off of the combat. Combat's real simplistic. It had it where it's like you have strength, speed, and technique, and it's like one beats out the other. So like technique beats out speed, or speed beats power, and power beats technique, or something like that. So it's just like a 3-ring system, and you and your monster basically have these settings that you set on each of you and them, and then depending on who gets attacked by what is the outcome of it. It was, yeah, so it's like Pokemon and Monster Hunter mixed in with a little like JRPG. I mean, Pokemon is a JRPG if we're going to be technical here, but you know what I mean. It's more than just attacks. It was just kind of, with the whole setup of you running around in this overworld, and then you actually physically ran into the monsters and fought them, and then that would queue up the fight. It's interesting. I'll keep an eye out for it. Once again, no announcement coming to the West. Now, for things are coming to the West, we got Ace Attorney 6 they showed off. They showed some gameplay, but I don't speak Japanese, so that's worthless to me. What they did show in the trailer, though, is that you're in a new area, like always. You don't seem to have an assistant like you did before, so you got that going for you. I mean, you could have one, they just don't show it, but that's just what I saw. And the whole, like, gimmicky thing with this one is that, like, apparently they have it where, at least in the story, it's that, they can see into, like, the dead. So if someone got murdered, they would just go look at the dead. They go ask the dead guy, the dead spirit, and be like, did he murder you? And they'd be like, yup. So that's the whole spiel with this. And they showed on the extended trailer that you're not going to just be playing as Phoenix Wright. Apparently Apollo Justice is in this, and they did mention that it's going to be a little bit more difficult than Dual Destinies, which they said was on the easy side. So it's going to be somewhere in between, like, the original games and the Dual Destinies in terms of difficulty. So hopefully, I'm looking forward to it. It is actually, that one's coming west. The question is for Ace Attorney is, will we see a physical release out here? And I really hope we do. So next up, we have Resident Evil Corpse. This is Capcom's big spiel about making it into competitive gaming, and I think this was really a poor entry, honestly, if that's their big push, because the game looks, not that exciting. It's just it's a run and gun game. That's all it is, and they're like, oh yeah, you can do this and that, and oh, here you can, you get this weapon and you can chop off zombies' heads, but it doesn't matter. I mean, they showed gameplay footage of somebody playing. The zombies barely react. They're just like set pieces. And really what you're worried about is fighting other people, but it just seems so bland. Like there was nothing going on. I don't get it. I don't see the appeal. I don't know why we're all excited, or if anybody's even excited about it. I mean, it's not supposed to be a full-fledged retail game. I think they said it's going to be like $20 or $30, but it's just not that interesting. It just looks like a run and gun shooter that happens to have zombies in the middle. So there's that. Next up, we're going to get out of Capcom here. We're done with Capcom. By the way, Capcom had like a lot of, if you watched any of it, Capcom had a fuck ton of merchandise for sale. Some of it I wanted, but not a lot of it. And I'm sure none of it will come over here, but they did have a lot. So Bandai Namco had Project X Zone 2, which is a crazy 3DS game crossover. It's a tactical RPG, but instead of the fighting taking place on like the actual tactical screen, what it does is it takes you into this like little combo fight mode. So you'll combo up all these, like, do X attack, Y attack, Z attack. I mean, it's a hard game to explain, but the way it works is, when you're fighting, you're just fighting these 2D sprites, and when you attack them, they fly up in the air. So the goal is to keep chaining combos so they never touch the ground, because that's the end of your attack. It's really fucking weird. They have characters from God knows everywhere. There's characters from every fucking game possible. So they showed off that. It's crazy over the top. I think they even announced that there's going to be like Xenoblade characters and Fire Emblem characters in there. Just every fucking franchise is like crossed up in this. So yeah, they have that coming. They showed off God Eater. It's one of those games that this is another Hunter-esque game that for whatever reason will not be coming over to the West, but who knows, maybe it will. Yeah, so I think it's coming to PS4 and Vita, unlike previous entries, which have only come, it's coming to Vita and PS4. So maybe with the big push of all these, PS4 games, they might bring them, they seem more willing to bring PS4 games over to the West, which makes sense because we're more home console gamers than the, mobile only one. So maybe we might see it. Who knows? I don't know. But I mean, they showed off some, fighting some monsters and stuff, but there's a story obviously going on there that none of us know about because we never got to play any of them. So we're gonna move on to the what are we on? Oh, Spike Chunsoft, which is a company's name I never even heard of, even though I own one of their games. So Spike Chunsoft showed off Danganronpa 3. If you never played Danganronpa, it is a visual novel that's kind of a cross between a lot of other visual novel games. I mean, there's some Phoenix Wright in there with the lawyering, but it has a crazy story. That's their big theme, is they have this crazy over-the-top story that's focused on despair. And yeah, it's an interesting game. If you have a Vita, I'd check it out. But they're bringing Danganronpa 3 over to PS4 and Vita. Once again, there's that PS4 entry. Seeing a theme here? So, yeah, they're bringing that over. It's just another continuation because pretty much all the Danganronpas are kind of separate in their, they're their own little, like, games. They don't really intertwine that much, so you don't really have to worry about them. Next up, they had Exist Archive, another JRPG. Did you notice there's a lot of JRPGs? I mean, this is Japan, so I shouldn't be too surprised by that notion. But yeah, they showed off Exist Archive. It's another one of these 2D games, right? So you explore the world in a 2D realm. And then when, you may interact with it, you may fight things or whatever that may not take you into the combat. But then at some point, you'll run into a creature and you'll go into combat, which is a 3D turn-based setting. It's a really weird combination that they have working for them. And I noticed there's a lot of, this is like the third, basically 2D overworld game. So it's a theme going here. I don't know anything more about it, but it's coming to PS4 and Vita, like most things are in this. Like most things are in here. This is like the PS4 Vita game show, because most of these will be coming to PS4 and Vita. So finally, we're gonna wrap it up here with we have Star Fox being delayed into spring 2016. I'm not a big Star Fox person. All right, so that wasn't a blow to me. I wasn't planning on getting it at release, and I still probably are not. I'm just gonna wait till it gets cheaper and then grab it. I mean, I have Star Fox 64 for the 3DS. I have not really put any time into it, so it's on that list of things I'll do, but I was never a Star Fox person growing up. Another thing, this is like an odds and ends kind of thing, is that Konami has pretty much, there's a report basically saying that Konami's done with AAA games outside of the one soccer game they do. So we kind of all saw this coming. We knew this was happening. They mentioned it. But this is like the first time we've actually heard the report of like Konami's like, no, we're bowing out of this. So like always, fuck Konami. I'm just going to leave it there, because that means that all those beloved franchises that we have, which are you got Castlevania, you got Silent Hill. I think they did Bomberman. Metal Gear is obviously done. All those have pretty much hit the back burner now, and we probably won't see we probably will not see another entry into any of those games. Or if we do, it's going to be some weird fucking, Castlevania mobile where you have to pay microtransactions for the, to get to the next part of the castle. Who the hell knows? I have no idea. But they'll be doing that. So yeah, it's Konami being Konami, and you know what? Fuck Konami. You know what? That's just one last thing we got to cover now. We don't have to worry about Konami anymore, because they're done. At least Metal Gear Solid 5 will be their swan song, even though it's really Hideo Kojima's swan song. But regardless, they're done. So we have to now hope for the people who started those franchises, the Castlevania and all their projects, now to make their own projects. And luckily, like I said, the Castlevania guy, he's working on his, and hopefully Hideo Kojima will start up another Metal Gear-esque game, name it something else, and begin a new franchise with that, because I would look forward to that. And won't be under Konami, because fuck Konami. And yeah, so that's I think I went over everything. I'm sure there's some obscure games that I missed, I didn't talk about, and I know this was a lot to listen to one person just rant for 45 minutes, but you know what? This is what happens when no one else comes to join me. So what was I was gonna say one more thing. Oh yeah, for this TGS, I just want to say, if there's anything you should gather out of this long, like, information spew that was this episode, it's that this is perhaps one of, if not the most internationally minded TGS. All right, TGS has traditionally been a very Japanese-only affair, and it was very tailored to Japanese-only consumers and Japanese-only products, etc. Because why wouldn't it be? Because it's, the Tokyo Game Show. But it's important to note that, even things like E3, even though it's in, California, it's still planned for it. I mean, it meant for an international audience, right? So this has been the most internationally minded version of the Tokyo Game Show. A fair amount of the games that I mentioned throughout all this, I mean, a good, like, probably 75% of them will be coming over to the West. So if you've never been a big fan of JRPGs or Japanese games in general, and you wanted to get into them, or you want to start trying some Japanese games, this is the time to do it, because they're bringing over some of the big ones. So I gotta say, I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to these more these Japanese games making more of an influence over here, because then we won't have an issue like we did with this podcast episode where people were like, well, I've never heard of these games. It's like, neither have I, but you still give them a look. You still give them a, check them out, see what they are, because they may be really good. And just because you haven't heard of them doesn't mean they're bad. It just means you might have to do a bit more digging because they're not as popular over here. But with the way things are going, especially, after this TGS, I think we're going to start seeing a much bigger Japanese presence when it comes to games over in the West. I mean, they've always been here. It's just, I think now we're going to start seeing support for them that we didn't see before. I mean, and the proof is in the pudding here with this TGS was the first one to have an English stream, and that's awesome. I mean, there was plenty of places that would like live tweet or whatever what they were seeing, but it's the first time we had like Twitch had streams of us, walking around TGS, and that was in English, and there was a couple of broadcasts. I mean, even Sony's press conference had English subtitles. So I'm looking forward to seeing more Japanese stuff become more. Their business is switching over to a more international mindset than Japan only. So I look forward to seeing a lot of these games come over, and that were once obscure, maybe they'll become smash hits. Whoever knew? So tell me your thoughts on the games I talked about, what I mentioned, anything, just anything at all. So if you weren't big into Japanese games, or maybe now you're interested in checking them out, what have you. So maybe there's a few after checking out TGS that you're like, I'm gonna give that a go. Or maybe you're still in the same mindset. Just let me know if you have a change of heart now, or you're still stuck in like, nah, they're still not for me. Or maybe there's a few oddballs that you're like, no, I'd give that a try. So let me know in the comments below, Twitter, Facebook. Make sure to let everybody else know who, if you're a fan of this podcast, make sure you let the other podcasters know who were supposed to be here that they totally failed. And that's all their fault that I'm the only one talking here. So until then, we'll see you next week with hopefully people actually here. So until then, we'll see you all later, guys.